and welcome you to our Thought Leader series tonight, featuring the legendary venture capitalists Claudia Munce and Heidi Roizen. Let me start with a quick question. How many of you registered for the event? Because the original title was Women in VC. Oh, how many of you came because the title is Building Relationships to Career Transitions? Oh, interesting. Wow, that's surprising. Well, initially, we chose the title Women in VC to honor the exceptional contributions of female leaders like Claudia and Heidi in VC. However, I observed a pattern. The registration was slow and mostly female. Yeah. So we changed nothing but the title into Building Relationships to Career Transitions. And immediately, 30 more sign-ups surged just in 1 hour, and we're oversold at 160 registrations today.
Wow. That's quick thinking, yeah.
Yeah, nothing changed but this tiny title. And this room is a testament to that tiny change. Well, I think this is how I think we made a difference. I still believe advocating for female leadership is essential in VC. HBS research shows only 11% of partners in the US in VC are women. However, we champion leaders like Claudia and Heidi not just because they are women, but because they have made exceptional contributions and results to VC and the startup ecosystem. They are exceptional thought leaders who happen to be women. And so tonight, we'll first hear from Claudia, followed by Heidi, and then we'll have a fireside chat together with both. While Claudia and Heidi are already the public figures who need no introduction, I would love to highlight 6 things they share in common. Number 1, both of them have worked in VC for over 2 decades. Now, Claudia is a venture advisor at MEA, and Heidi is partner at Threshold. Number 2, both of them transitioned to VC from other successful careers in other fields. Claudia was as executive at IBM, and Heidi was a tech entrepreneur. And number 3, both of them has been written in case studies both at HBS and Stanford for their expertise in building networks and relationships in VC. And number 4, both have sit on multiple boards, including public ones. For example, Claudia on Best Buy and Heidi on Planet Lab. And number 5, they both teach at Stanford. The classes I highly recommend. And number 6, finally, they are proud moms with happy kids. There's one difference though. It was Claudia's idea to invite Heidi to be the paired speaker and panelist tonight, together with her. So the credit goes to Claudia for making these remarkable moments like this possible. With that, please welcome the incredible Claudia Munce.
Let me see this thing working. Can you guys hear me?
Oh, yes.
All right, so I'm supposed to just introduce myself before Jing gave us, the questions that we like to answer, and hopefully we get to take some of yours as well. I'm Claudia Munce. Being in venture, she gave such a glorious introduction. If you like anything I said, will just bring you down rather than elevate myself. But my journey really started in Brazil. I was one of the typical foreign students that landed in United States for graduate studies. And I was very lucky to be able to secure a scholarship when I was back in Brazil, University of São Paulo, to be able to come to this country in pursuit of a master's degree in computer science. Back there, we were so jealous of the United States because we heard that every student in the US had a terminal to work with. and we have to punch car and wait in line and wait for the car to come out just to fix a semicolon somewhere in your programming. For those of you that are my age group, I think you can relate better. For those of you that can't relate, it's one of those little car with a bunch of holes in it. So my journey started there. So I landed here literally like many foreign students with 2 suitcases and hoping that I would get my degree, get a nice job back in Brazil, and be able to build my career from there. It's very lucky for me that during my summer studies, I had an offer from IBM Research Lab, which really was at that point the premier industrial research center. And that really brought me to my professional career with IBM, which I remember joining IBM and hiring manager was celebrating his quarter century with IBM. And I'm like, who does that? Who stay with the same company for 25 years? That's like a lifetime. Well, 30 years later, I retired from IBM. So I have surpassed him and beyond. But that career took me from a technical career as an engineer for the R&D research center, all the way to actually, amazing enough these days, with all the AI, ML, my master was in machine vision. So it's like, there's these waves that comes and goes, as you can imagine. So I was part of the IBM research for the first 15 years of my life. My career really was very much in the technical field. Then I became the head of commercialization and licensing for IBM Research Lab. I was very honored when IBM chose me to come back to GSB as the chosen one for the Sloan program. And I think many of you were also part of that Sloan program graduate. And after I went back to IBM, I continued my career there. Eventually, IBM set out a venture capital group, and that's how I became an accidental VC, not knowing anything about, what does a software engineer know about venture capital, especially when you spend the first 15 years in IBM. And believe it or not, that actually was the most wonderful job that I could ever imagine. Because if you're in venture, I imagine many of you are, you're literally a kid in the candy store, right? There's new people, new technology, wacky ones, good ones, bad ones, and you're constantly being amazed by the energy, the entrepreneurship, the incredible talent that you find here in Silicon Valley. And I was one of the minority. I was a corporate investor arriving in the Valley, where there's already legendary VCs like Heidi. Nobody really, actually, I used to tell my CEO, a good meeting is when they rip my business card after the meeting and not during the meeting. It was something that they do not understand, why a corporation. And remember, this is the year 2000. And for those of you that were around, that was the year that you literally walk down the hall and you're funded, right? You don't need to have any other merit but be able to walk down the hall. And it was just a crazy time in the venture, and nothing to do with corporate, right? Who needs corporate? Those are the companies that you're trying to displace, right? This is why the startup are thinking, this is really the new era. So arriving as a corporate investor at that time wasn't a very easy sell. So unfortunately for me, as Jim said, I was very lucky to create a great network of investors. So IBM did enter in tremendous partnership with the venture community, and eventually was able to do a lot of very good things on behalf of IBM as well as for venture. As a matter of fact, I was the very first corporate investors that joined the National Venture Capital Association in the 47th year of its history. It was covered by New York Times, Wall Street Journal. Like, what are they doing? He's a corporate investor. He shouldn't be there. So that was a career in venture. Really taught me a lot about how do you create a network of people around you that can support your mission, that can support your agenda. And at the end of the day, this is something that Jim is going to talk to both of us about. How do you create that network that can really help you progress in whatever mission that you're trying to drive? So with that, I'm going to leave it there and bring up Heidi.
All right. It's always hard to follow Claudia. I have a history of following Claudia around a lot of things. So, and I want to say you've learned a very important lesson, which I'm not necessarily always proud of this, but I was actually on the board of the parent company of the Daily Mail for 10 years, and you learn a lot about writing headlines, and so that's not very different, which is it's all about the headline. So, and the one most important thing I learned for anybody who reads the Daily Mail, I don't need to see a show of hands, I know who you are, is if it ends in a question mark, they already know it's not true. So just remember that. That was one of the most important things I learned about journalism of the type that they do, is they still want to write the article, they still want you to click on it, but they already know it's not true. So if you see a question mark, you don't need to read it. I'm going to just talk about, I'm going to tee up 3 topics. I think one of the questions that we were supposed to lead in with was sort of, can you give us 3 takeaways about being a venture capitalist and what you've learned about venture. And I have been a venture capitalist since the last millennium, which is a very long time. And I have learned 3 things. I hope I've learned more, but I'll tell you about 3 of them. The first one is that how can you be a venture capitalist for 20-something years, 26 years? Because people don't change. Technologies change, platform wars change, the speeds change, emerging things change, but people don't change. People are complicated, people are messy, people are amazing, people are what drives companies. And so the number one thing I think I've learned after being on, whatever it's been now, 40 plus boards, Claudia and I both share that. We've been on a lot of boards. Yes. I've been on 9 public boards. I think you've been on even more. But anyway, we've done a lot of board work, and the reality is that it's all about the people. Which brings me to my second point. My second point is, what is venture capital all about? What is it you have to be good at to be a venture capitalist? And I call it 2 things. I call it hunting and farming. So on the hunting side, as my partner Emily says, you can only do the deals you see. And so the hunting part's really important, right? How you get out there, what you're looking for, and how you meet those people. Because again, it's the people who are driving the deals. I am personally a believer, even though I'm a generalist, I am a believer in people who have sector focus, areas of expertise, and have a thesis of their own that they're pursuing. Remember, in venture, and I know a lot of you are in venture, I hope you agree with me, we are not the creative people. We are not the ones coming up with the ideas. We're not the ones running the companies. But you have to be able to know what you're looking for and know what a good one is when you see it. And I use the analogy sometimes of, some VCs I know are beachcombers. So they're walking along and they look down and there's a shell and they pick it up and they're like, oh, that's interesting, I'll put it in my pocket, right? And so you see, who these VCs are, none of us, of course. But they're the kind of people who are like, they don't have a plan, and then you say, here, look at this bright shiny object, and they go look at that bright shiny object and maybe they invest and maybe they don't. And by the way, some VCs do really well at this. Not as many. The ones who are really good at this, they blow my mind, but I don't understand how they're so good at that. As opposed to what I'll call deep sea divers. Deep sea diver understands what they're looking for and where it's likely to be. And so the chance that they're actually going to find something that fits the model is much more likely if you actually go and deep sea dive for something as opposed to beachcombing. I think this is one of the hardest things to actually do in venture, because of course, in order to be a deep sea diver, you actually have to know what you're looking for and where to go look for it. And so I do think there is actually a default that a lot of VCs do, and I admit I do this on many occasions myself, which is you're not necessarily sure where the world is going, and so you revert to just, I'll take a bunch of meetings and I'll see if some pattern starts to emerge, which of course we're always accused of being pattern recognizers, which of course we are. So anyway, I think that number one, you got to be a good hunter, because at the end of the day, you're also only judged by the deals you do. But I think you also have to be a good farmer. This is more controversial than you think it would be, because of course there are people who think all we VCs do is actually, frankly, kind of get in the way. And if we would just leave them alone, everybody would do a better job. I think there have been a number of recent stories in the news where I think if the entrepreneurs had had more governance, maybe they wouldn't have gotten in the trouble they've gotten in. I like to think governance is a good thing, but it's not about governance. It's not about sitting there and you know, that's table stakes for what we do as farmers and what we do on the boards. I think the real talent is to be that person who works behind the scenes, the people whisperer. And I think it's one of the most challenging things, and I bet, I've never talked about this, but going from being an operating person to being a VC is you have this constant, I call it put me in coach syndrome, where all you want to do is, I can fix this, I can go do this, I can tell you what to do. And what you learn over time is that does not work. And so one of the things I said actually to the chairman of the board of DMGT, when I was on his board, is I said, you know, the most important work I do as a board member, if I do it right, you're never gonna know I did it. Because I really believe that the most influence we can have on the farming side is to help the people on the company's leadership team be successful. Not us to do the work, to help them become successful. So I think this farming part, and you can probably tell by what I'm saying, is I really like farming a lot better than I like hunting, which is very lucky because for the last 12 years I've had the job of being the super farmer in our fund. I'm not even making new investments anymore. I'm exclusively working with not only our junior partners, but also various portfolio companies coming in and out. I have boards of my own, but I will also go and do additional work with companies to help them get through difficult transitions, whether that's a CEO transition, whether that's a recap, whatever it is. Lots of people are going through lots of difficult things right now, so it's a really exciting time to do that. And the final thing I'll say, and this is more generic, and for any of you who've been to business school and had my case, which they no longer teach here, so oh well, is you should not be surprised to hear that I think life is about relationships and not transactions. And I think that there are VCs who are very transactional, and I think those VCs get in trouble, and they don't get to be VCs any longer. Because the reality is, again, as my partner Emily likes to say, you make your money on your good deals, and you build your reputation on your bad deals. And so one of the things you learn is in this industry, people come back over and over again, and people can find out about you. You know, you're doing due diligence on the entrepreneur, well, they're doing due diligence on you as well. And if you've gone about everything in a transactional way, and you've always tried to optimize things for you at the moment in time, you're gonna make a lot of long-term bad decisions. I was just talking to one of my former students today, who's now a VC, and one of the things that I was talking about is there are a lot of young VCs who have never seen bad VC behavior because they've never had to, right? They haven't seen a recap, they haven't seen companies going out of business, they haven't had to put carve-outs in place, and they haven't seen VCs optimizing for their own situation over the portfolio company. They don't understand the idea that, for example, if you've had 3 deals that just failed, and this is the 4th deal, and your boss said, if this one goes under or has a down round, you're getting fired, and all of a sudden, it is really in the company's best interest to do a down round, but you're out fundraising on the book with the last round's price in there, and you don't want it to change right now, because you're gonna lose your job, the fund's not gonna raise money, and so none of you, and but other people might do something like, for example, say, oh, no, you're not gonna raise money right now, let's cut, or let's do an internal bridge, or let's just pile more preferences on top right now, but by God, let's not change that valuation, because if you change the valuation, they're gonna lose their job, which has nothing to do with you or your startup or actually doing the right thing. And so this was a lesson I learned myself, because I became a VC in 1999, which, as you can imagine, was a really good year. Yes. And then there was 2000, and after that, and those were really not good years. And I would say that the silver lining in that is I got to see a lot of really bad behavior, and so I can at least identify it now when it starts happening. So with that, let's get into some questions and talk as a group.
Yes.
Thank you, Heidi and Claudia.
Okay.
Cheers.
Here you go.
Okay.
Yes. First, thank you. I think first it's so wonderful to see such two legendary role models in VC who are friends with each other at the same stage. So Claudia, could you share a pivotal moment or stories that drew you closer to Heidi and make you value her as a friend and collaborator in VC?
So when I first become the head of the venture for IBM, there was such a thing as an annual meeting of the National Venture Capital Association. And the NVCA, which I mentioned earlier that I eventually became a board member, has this big annual, big brouhaha, this very distinguished board, which Heidi was part of that, the people like John Doerr, Mike Maurice, and Scott Sandel, all these top VC were part of that board at some point in time. And I remember there was a woman, separate woman gathering. So all curious, being the newcomer, I went there. And Heidi, of course, was the one hosting it. And so this was actually in 2001, and things are getting pretty sour by then, right? And so the ways that Heidi talked about the crisis, the bluntness that she had about what is going on in the marketplace really was eye-opening for me, because most people were in denial still at that point. As a matter of fact, there was some language that Heidi used to describe the crisis that I, as this goody shooty Chinese woman coming out of the big blue IBM, is like, wow.
I probably used some body language.
Very much, yes. But at the same time, I thought, how refreshing is that for somebody to be that bluntly honest about what is going on, when the whole industry was still pretty much in denial at that point. But one thing I think that really is attractive, and that was, she talked about farming. I don't know if you guys know the podcast that Heidi has. Heidi, in principle, are in the protective mode of entrepreneurs. That's how I listen to her podcast. And she's really trying to prevent the entrepreneur from all the major pitfalls that there is. And many of them, by the way, benefit us, the investors, and really is something that the most entrepreneur, suffer. I mean, we can lose an investment, but entrepreneur is 7 years of their lives that they never going to get back. So the principle of that podcast really showed exactly what drew me to her, is this really helpful, honest feedback that she wanted to give in the form of advice to be helpful to others. And I think that in this community, believe it or not, is very rare to find that.
Thank you, Claudia.
I like the colorful language. I got used to it after a while.
Yeah.
I never used to talk like that till I became a VC.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. It was very refreshing. I thought, well, we don't talk like that in IBM, but it was great.
Yeah. Well, Heidi, turning to you.
Yeah.
First, I'm a huge fan of the podcast. In one episode, you mentioned Claudia as legendary.
Yes.
So, could you share the attributes or character you see in Claudia that make you think her as a legendary role model?
Yeah.
And what can the next generations of aspiring leaders learn from her example?
Well, I mean, Claudia, first of all, as you guys can probably tell, we get along, we're great friends and all of that. And I also appreciate Claudia's bluntness and honesty. I remember, just a couple months ago, I emailed her and I said, hey, I really need a connection at this particular company, and I saw this person that just got announced as the new head of their fund, and I said to her, can you introduce me? And she goes, well, I could, but he never gets anything done. Okay, great. She's like, let me introduce you to the like number 2 person there, because they're the one who actually gets things done. And I just really appreciate that kind of honesty, right? I mean, we're all working with each other, and I appreciated that. It would have been so easy for her to just introduce me, and instead she went out of her way to say, no, what you're asking for isn't what you actually want. So, I mean, I think the thing that has always impressed me about Claudia, in addition to all that, is she basically willed the legitimacy of the corporate venture investor into place, right? I mean, when she started doing it, there weren't. No, you did. I mean, there wasn't, like, most people didn't even know what that. IBM didn't know what it was when she came up with the idea, right? And so this idea to legitimize, and I think it wasn't easy. Like, I know I was on the board of NVCA when she was banging on the door, and we're like, do we really want those corporate people here? They don't really do what we do, I don't think. And then, you know, getting to know her and getting to know how she would promote the investment philosophy, because you know, again, VCs engage in some bad behavior. Corporate VCs engage in some bad behavior too. We've talked at great length about that. And so there's, you know, even the VC community was hesitant about the corporate VC community because we saw them as a community that had another agenda. You know, the thing I like to say is, in venture capital, we make money when your stock goes up. In corporate VC, they make money when their stock goes up. And so they're just investing with a different goal in mind, primarily. A strategic investor is just that. They have a strategy for investing, not pure cash on cash investors like, you know, like us guys. And so I just think that she went about it internally at IBM with the venture community, as she just talked about, with the MBCA and all of us collectively, and then with the corporate VC community, bringing them together, getting this organization off the ground to the point now where, I mean, its meetings far outsize the NBCA meetings. We have like 1,000 people at those meetings. Like, it's just crazy. So I think she just did something that, I don't think it was really a personal benefit for her. I think it was that she saw this and wanted it to be, you know, brought to the league of the VC community and said, I'm going to make this happen, and she did. And that's kind of amazing.
Thank you.
Wow, thank you. Thank you. And let's delve into career transitions. The topic many of our alumni and students consider seriously. So Claudia, your transition from a corporate executive to a venture capitalist is so inspiring. So can you share your top 3 do's and don'ts for the audience who are considering a similar path like you?
Thank you. You know, I mean, all the key points that Heidi brought out are very applicable across the board. But for me, learning about venture, learning about this community, coming from a corporate, and by the way, which since my time has become much bigger share of the venture ecosystem, from a financial injection is now almost 50% of all the capital invested by venture come from corporations, and there's over 2,600 corporate investors represented. So it is really something that at that point, not only the venture community did not understand, I think many of the corporations did not understand. There has been cycles since the 70s of corporations like General Motors and other attempting to invest off their balance sheet or with their pension funds and all kind of other financial investment. But as a strategic investor, it was a fairly new thing. I mean, as we all saw the shift happening in the marketplace, many corporations, majority of them operated by the FOMO effect of, wow, you know, we need to catch up, we need to understand what is going on. So the corporate venture was coming in a wave, and that wave is still here today. So when I came in, I needed to understand what really is the job that I was given. I mean, remember, I was a homegrown executive. It was my first job. I never wrote a resume in my life because I was hired as an intern, and then before I graduated, they gave me a job. I never applied for one. So it was like, okay, I've been so comfortable, so blessed in that environment of being nurtured by a company that had a culture of nurturing new employee, and particularly someone like me who barely spoke English. You know, they put me through accent reduction classes. They gave me coaching about, you know, where to wave my hand. You can tell it doesn't work, but still, they try. But, you know, it is really coming to an environment and trying to understand where is your network. Who are the people you need to be connected with? And by the way, who are the people that you need to stay away from is just as important. And as an engineer, by training, I actually had a 26 variable matrix. So I established from their investment thesis to their track record, you know, to who is part of the team, what is your reputation, you know, how much of the size of the fund they have and how much they put in reserve, how many follow-on. I mean, it literally was a 26 variable matrix, and trying to determine who are the leaders in the communities that we want to talk to. Of course, many of these leaders, we shall not name, basically said to us, no, corporate, stay away from us. You're just going to, you know, mislead our company. You don't really have the company building muscle memory. We don't really need you. We got plenty of capital. Remember, year 2000, I mean, 1999, we were still at $36 billion investment. 2000 is when we hit 100. So that was the jump that was going. So 2000 was the la land of the venture community. I mean, I wasn't joking when I said you just need to walk down the hall and somehow, you know, they think you're investable. So learning about being patient, learning about who are the real investors and not just follow the shiny objects that everybody follow. And many of those shiny objects are no longer around today. And really being very passionate was really how we were able to transition into a successful organization operating this very new ecosystem that was foreign to IBM. The venture groups that I led was the very first initiative that IBM ever had in working with the venture community, you know, over 100 years of the history that he has. So it was very foreign, not just to the venture world, but internally. And people are like, what are you doing? Did you get demoted? Did you do something wrong? You know, do they not like you anymore? You know, why did you get that terrible job when you come from such a prestigious job like IBM R&D, you know, head of commercialization and licensing? So we really were, I would say, with a great team around me, able to establish incredible tight network with the venture investors, and primarily knowing who, I mean, if you look at what is the secret sauce, is these people know what to pick, right? But they also know when to fold. And that quality was, I would say, an important quality that corporation by and large doesn't know that. There are people who you just gotta walk away, right? You just gotta say, you know what, he's just not for me. You know, I'm gonna go around this person. Doesn't matter the big brand name that they might possess. So when you come into a transitioning from one environment to another, I think at the end of the day, who is the networks that needs to be the network you lean on is really the secret sauce.
Thank you, Claudia. And Heidi, you also transitioned successfully from an entrepreneur to a venture capitalist. And what's your top 3 do's and don'ts for the audience who consider a similar path like you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of them I already talked about, which is don't run the company for the entrepreneur. Yeah, it's not your job, it's not your company. Don't go around them to talk to their team. Like, you have to figure out the role that you have, and it's not a leadership role. And that's really hard when you've been a CEO for, you know, a decade, and that's how you do things. And in fact, it was funny because we have this other investor, I won't name his name, but he's a billionaire, and he decided to start doing angel investing, and so he had put this money in one of the companies I was on the board of, and something was going wrong, and he called the entrepreneur up, and he's like, I want you to do this and do this and do this and do this, and the entrepreneur called me up, and he's like, I'm so raging mad at that guy. And I said, you know what, he's just used to being the CEO. Like, that's his whole life has been, he did this startup, he's a multi-billionaire, he's used to telling people what to do, and he hasn't learned yet. Like this is his first deal. So he's learned it since then. But you know, I do think that that's the biggest don't be the operating person. I think the biggest do is do have the empathy for the role. I think it's one of the things that makes all the people who come from operating roles and go into venture valuable. Is it isn't even necessarily the learned experience. It is helpful to have a learned experience, but you know, whenever I see a VC like say, oh, we have to cut expenses, lay off 20% of your team. And then they're like, okay, let's go out for drinks now. You know, like, oh, just off with their heads. You know, and the reality is that for that CEO, it's so hard to do that. Like, even if you have to do it, and even if you know, I come around and say, well, look, you can lay off 20% now, or you can lay off 100% 6 months from now when you run out of money. So like this is really a survival thing. You get to make the choice. It's not like one choice is easy and the other choice is hard. They're both hard, but I have empathy for you. And you know, after you do it, if you want to call me up and cry or whatever it is, I remember those days myself. And so I do think that empathy is the thing that we can all bring to our jobs, transitioning in.
Thank you for a candid response. On the note of authenticity, I know both of you have very strong, authentic personalities, but are also public figures who need to manage the public image strategically. So I'm curious, how do you balance your personal persona with your public branding? And this time, let's start with Heidi.
Okay, wow, that's a hard question. I have a podcast about that. It's called The Case of the Social Media Meltdown, and it's aimed at it. And this actually happened. It was an entrepreneur who you know, shit posted, and then all of a sudden, we know a lot of those right now. And in fact, it was really funny because I did not intend this, because I really try to make my podcast all about kind of evergreen topics that could be useful at any time, but this just happened to have a timing on the week that some really big person got fired for saying the wrong thing on social media. So it was like, oh, thanks for doing that. You made my point. But you know, for me, I think that for any of us who have a career that has a profile, you have to think about what your social media strategy is. And mine personally, I tell my students this all the time. I say, just never post anything unless you're willing to be hated for it.
Yeah.
If you're willing to be hated for it, go ahead. Although, if you're an entrepreneur and you post things that you're willing to be hated for, but it also affects your employees and your investors and your customers, then maybe you ought to think twice about doing that, because it's no longer just about you. But, you know, for example, for me, while I may have strong political views, I may have strong views about certain political things, I don't post about politics. And I've just made that decision because also I sit on boards where I sit on boards where there are people of, you know, different ends of the political spectrum, and I don't want to disenfranchise those people with whom I don't share the same politics, because we're all working together. On the other hand, I have a trans child, and I have seen firsthand what it's like for a trans person to go through the challenges of what it's like to be a trans person in America, in the workforce, all of these things. And so that is something I'm willing to be hated for. If you don't want to have me on your board, or you don't want to work with me because I am supportive of trans people, go ahead and hate me. Make my day. That's fine with me. And so I have posted about that, and I have written posts about how to make the workplace more, a better, safer place for the LGBTQ community. So I think that just everybody has to think about what it is they're doing out there, because the other thing is anybody can discover anything out there, right? I mean, so thinking that you're going to get away with posting something on, if I post it over here on this site where only my friends have access, nobody's going to see it. That is no longer true. So how about you?
Nobody can get away with anything anymore,
No.
right? I'm gonna answer a little different perspective. I think all of us, when we talk to our mentee, we always say, be your authentic self. People ask, especially as a minority, as an AAPI, people ask me, how much of your, a cultural value, your ethnical value, you have to actually check at the door when you're trying to perform at a certain level. But the truth of the factor is, it is really hard, and I think Heidi already spoke to that. When you represent a company, when you represent a venture firm, even today, I love to be that grumpy old lady that can just tell you, you suck. But I can, right? Just like all our career we've gone through, sitting in front of a poor performing employee and saying, I don't think this job is well aligned with your talent. Maybe you should think about doing something. Everybody, I hate to say that, but you gotta realize that it is something that have other impact rather than being very truthful to how you feel. Same thing with the politics and everything else. I'm still waiting for, wait for my memoir. I'm gonna dish all the dirt. Once I'm just associated with anybody, any company, anybody, and only carry my own name as my burden. But I think you want to be authentic to who you are, but you also want to be very measured about how much of your viewpoint is really warranted to be in that particular situation. Because sometimes, it is just not a constructive thing, and you're operating on your emotion. I think the successful woman, man, anybody in the career, that level of emotional stamina to be able to count until 10 or 20 or whatever it takes for you to count to, and be able to have that reserve, approach about expressing, in a constructive way. And sometimes it does take, a tremendous emotional stamina to be able to do that. But I think those that were able to adjust and adapt and be able to create, never burn any bridges, never really, have any kind of very hot, because venture community is actually a very small community, and the reputation is something very easily, obtained. I always tell people, you can figure out about anybody in this community. There's not one degree. By second degree of separation, you can learn everything about them. So I think you do have to, in this public and private, you can go home and kick your dog and do whatever you want to get rid of your frustration. But I do think you have to have a much longer term view, because the chances are you're gonna come back and cross that bridge again and again. You just don't know when. So I will, caution you about looking at anything from a very transactional point of view, and think of it as this is one community and there's all these interdependencies, and you don't know which way you're going to cross that and meet that again. Sometime down the road, you're going to need to work with somebody that you absolutely, have low opinion of, and you can't burn that bridge just because you feel the way you do.
Wow, thank you. Learned a lot. Now let's discuss relationships and building relationships, which is crucial in VC. And Claudia, your CVC career has been written in both case studies at HBS and Stanford for your ability to cultivate the network in VC globally. So, and now we know that corporate venture is representing almost 50% of all the invested capital. And knowing what you know now, would you have done anything differently in your approach to build networks and relationships?
The leader and the follower, in my view, in the global venture community. Doesn't matter where you are. You go to Vietnam, the Vino, JFK Vino was the leader at that, 20 years ago when I was there. So in the venture community, really identify who are the most respected investors and have a deep relationship. The relationship requires the level of investment, it requires quid pro quo, require you to really be able to articulate your value add. So when I first arrived in the venture community, one thing that IBM had, even though they didn't need our capital, we have a tremendous view in the marketplace because we serve them, right? We have a tremendous technological understanding because we got a rich R&D labs behind us. So what can we do? How can we have a dialogue with you? We can offer you our viewpoint. Well, we're seeing the financial industry of 80% of all the global banks use IBM as the IT vendor at that point. Can we offer you a point of view that can help you developing your investment thesis? Or can we help you as part of your due diligence role of that? So you really become identifying the people that you really feel can create that win-win value proposition to, and then go to them with your value proposition. And then from there, it is amazing to me that once you have this reputation of someone who add value, right, it has become easier and easier. It's almost like if you are able to sustain a certain level of relationship at the right level, certainly everybody wants to have a relationship with you. Even though before that they might see you as just, corporate, we used to be called the dumb money in the venture industry. No, seriously, that was how it was described. The corporate was the dumb money. When they refer to dumb money, they mean corporate investors. And we held that reputation for many years until study after study shows that the deal has corporate money actually has a higher level of success.
Well, and I'm going to jump on something because it's one of my favorite things you taught me is one of the reasons you want to let corporate investors, particularly large, important corporate investors, come in is because guess who buys our companies? We only make money when the companies either go public or get acquired. Most of them don't go public. And so, Claudia, I was doing this podcast, I'm trying to help people understand why it's so important to do biz dev and with corporate and why corporate venture can play a role in that. And I said, tell me about IBM. Like, you did this for 17 years, you did a bunch of acquisitions. How many of the companies that you acquired were companies you already had a venture investment with? And the answer is
72.
And how many did you buy that you didn't have a relationship?
One.
Okay, we're talking about IBM here, right? IBM bought 72 companies that they had prior venture and biz dev relationships with, and they only bought one that they didn't. And they only bought that one because the one that they did have the relationship got bought by their competitor. Which I know because she told me that.
Yeah.
But it's like a no-brainer.
It is very arrogant to not think about all your exit alternative, right? Shutting any door at any stage of your company, it is just not very smart. Right? Regardless of how big you think IPO market is going to be, regardless you as a founder, it takes that level of conviction for you to really build a great company, to believe that you have a public company that you're building, but yet shutting the door to someone who might be a strategic partner, right? Who can compete with a distribution power of a corporate partner? IBM was at my generation, 173 countries operating, over 400,000 employees. We brought a company from Dublin, Ireland to solve the seafood export problem at Vietnam, which is number 2 seafood export company in the world. The global reach of your strategic partner, and that's what I was telling Heidi. I said, it is really, really amazing to me that somebody will look at that and say, well, wait, didn't I just tell you that 80+% of all the bank use IBM as their IT provider? And wait, you're a fintech company and you don't think we're relevant? How? In what world, in what planet do you think we can be irrelevant in that space when 10 of your banking transactions on a daily basis is being processed by IBM services? So I really feel the smart VCs from very early recognize that acquisition, partnership, sell to us, sell with us, sell through us, whatever shape and form, there is a potentially strategic outcome that the corporation can be valuable to a young startup. And even today, there's still companies that don't recognize that, which is really, really unfortunate, even giving the 50% of the capital coming from that source.
Yeah, indeed. I think, yes, a lot of lessons learned. But Heidi, you touched on some during your talk on the relationship buildings, but you've also been featured both in HBS case and Stanford case. I still remember studying your case when I was at GSB 10 years ago, and watch you walk into the classroom and talk about it. So, but knowing, a similar question to you, knowing what you know now, what would you have done differently in your approach to networking and building relationships then?
There's not anything I would go back and do differently. I mean, I've always been a person who I believe in the relationship, I believe in showing up and being who you are and all that sort of stuff. I think the thing that I now have the luxury to do at my stage in my career and my age, my advanced age, is I just don't have to do business with assholes anymore. And I'm sorry to say this, but there are, I don't know if anyone knows this, there are actually some really difficult people in our industry, and there are difficult people in the venture industry, there are difficult people in the entrepreneurial industry. Some of those people have made a lot of money. Some of those people have made their venture capitalists a lot of money. And I think that there is, earlier in my career, I would sort of say, well, gosh, they're really successful, and so even though they're just a jerk, and I don't want to deal with them, well, it's a competitive deal, and I want to win this deal, and whatever, and lucky you, then you win the deal, and then you're on the entrepreneur's board, and then they're terrible. Or they're mean, or they're delusional, or whatever it is. There's and by the way, and some of those people are the other VCs on the board, right? And they're just really not nice people. And so I now have the luxury of, some of those people could make a lot of money, but I just don't want to work with those people anymore. And so that's a choice that unfortunately earlier in your career it's a little harder to say. I don't do that, it's a little easier to do later, so.
That's what the grumpy old lady so
Yeah.
wants to be, right?
Yeah,
It's like,
I
I
agree.
don't care.
Grumpy old ladies.
It's a luxury to be a grumpy old lady.
Wow, it's indeed a luxury, and very luxury to get to your point. So I think we love your advice. A lot of advice so far, but let's check more. As we know, this month is AAPI Heritage Month, and Claudia, you just rang the closing bell at the New York Stock Exchange with other extraordinary Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders to honor the occasion. So what advice you would give to minorities, including Asian and women, who are aspiring to make the DER mark in VC today?
My sense, and this might not be a popular view to absorb, is we're very often than not our worst enemies. There's so much of us, putting roadblock onto our own progression in our career. This thing about, culturally, there's so many components about, don't be too loud, don't stand up too much, be part of the team, be in the background, don't stand up too much. I really don't feel I was smarter than anybody else, but I think my Brazilian part of me was really the differentiation, because the cultural clash between being a Chinese and grew up in Brazil, between somebody who loud and wave their hands and can shut up, is versus somebody who's supposed to be quiet and humble and obedient. was a very much of a cultural clash manifesting in me. I used to tell people, as Chinese, I don't trust anybody. As Brazilian, I want to invite everybody home with me. You know, so if you're lucky, you meet a Brazilian me or you meet a Chinese me, whichever. But I really feel it's because that the confidence that I had growing up in a Latin America culture, that almost overconfidence in many ways. Seriously, I still do, because I still find myself going to any situation with the confidence, hey, if I screw up, I'll fix it. It's not a big deal, right? And I think it's very difficult in an Asian culture to accept that, because our parents told us we can't do that, right? We're not supposed to make mistakes. We're not supposed to screw up. We're supposed to do everything right. And the Brazilian me just like marching and say, whatever, I'm gonna give it a shot and then see what happens. And I'm very famous for that. As my CEO used to tell me, I'm somebody you throw it in to solve problem for him, because I'm gonna try anything and I'm just gonna iterate on whatever mistake I'm making until I get it right. But I'm going to start right away doing something with the problem. So my advice to the AAPI, particularly Asian women that many I mentor, is realize that your differentiated identity is an asset, not an inhibitor to you. You don't have to see yourself as anything less, which I truly believe in most cases is the cause. They don't speak up for themselves, they don't advocate for their own career, they don't ask when they should have asked, and they don't complain when they should complain in a pragmatic way, of course. I was, as a very senior Asian woman, I used to be the executive that was hosting the employee resource group for Asian employees in this very large company. And over again, I see that. Super talented people who felt they're being underutilized. But then you go interview managers as an executive and they're like, what? We were trying to protect her. We thought she didn't really want to, do something different, that she was so comfortable where she is. So it really comes down to knowing what you want and go after that. I think the word empowerment is really what I like to offer, because for whatever stupid reasons that I don't really know in this, sort of a confusing cultural clash that I have in me, I always feel very powerful. Maybe because I have two brothers that want to fight me every day on the week. and that really allowed me, like I said, not being smarter or harder working than my peers, to really be able to achieve a lot in my career, because I asked for it, because I advocated for it, because I questioned, why am I not getting on that project? Why did you think about me when you thought about, having someone do that piece of work? And I have always asked those questions. There's nothing wrong with you asking questions in your own advocacy.
And asking for help.
Yeah.
I'll give an example, because I mentor a lot of young women VCs, and a lot of them just starting out, and I hear this common complaint. I'm in the board meeting, I can't get a word in edgewise.
Yeah.
Like, people talk over me, nobody, whatever, and because we're all taught to be very polite, we don't do anything. And I say, well, there's two things. First of all, you just have to tell yourself, I have a right to be here. Like, yeah, I know I have a right to be there, but I still can't get a word in edgewise. And I said, okay, then great. Find a champion, almost always a man, in the boardroom, and go to him and say, at the last board meeting, I couldn't get a word in edgewise. And I'd like you to do me a favor. If you see me go like this, I want you to say, I'd like to hear what Heidi has to say about that. I said, just do it once. And it's magical. Like, all of a sudden, if you pick the most senior person in the room and ask that person to do it, I think that's a really powerful way to get there. We all need champions. None of us would be here if we hadn't had champions. And so make someone be your champion. Ask them for that. And I've never had somebody say, oh, I asked somebody and they didn't do it, or I asked somebody and it didn't work. It always works, and people always do it. unless you're picking the wrong person, which,
And sometimes just people in your peer level can advocate for you too,
Yeah.
right? You can be in the same meeting with your peer level and basically say, hey, Heidi, did you try to say something?
Yeah.
Right? You can advocate for others even when you're not in that powerful position in the corporate hierarchy. And I think the more we do that for each other, the more we're going to see more minority being pulled forward. I think one of the things that I love from one of our mutual friend, and when you get to the position, we're very lucky. We obviously succeeded financially and making our the right best career, but so as you push forward, you should also pull along people with you. And I think as long as you keep that as a mentality for people that has been able to succeed. And a lot of it is luck, like I said. A lot of it, it's like it's gonna have to be completely different, right? We're kind of like sitting here and begging for donation for all I do. But
and some of it is also using. Well, there's a whole class here at the GSB on it. It's using humor. And I think humor is an interesting tool because it can also be, you can belittle yourself when you use humor. So you've got to be careful about, again, there are things I can say today that I maybe couldn't say when I was a brand new board member, right? Like if I don't understand something now, I can say things like, hey, I'm only at like the second grader level of what you're talking about. Could you please explain it to me? And they have to kind of let me say stuff like that. But I think you can also, I'll give you an example of humor, is I was in a board meeting once, we're very heated, I was the only woman, and somebody said, I think we better take a 5-minute break, but everybody kept talking about it, and then everybody went in the men's room, because they were all men. And so, I didn't want to be left out, so I knocked on the door, and I'm like, hey, if you guys are gonna keep talking about that, I'm coming in, and they thought it was funny, and so they laughed, and they stopped talking, and they came back out, right? And so, I do think that there are moments that sometimes you can diffuse the situation with a little bit of humor, but I do think there's a fine line, because again, if you're self-deprecating, it's. Have we kept everyone too long? I was
looking at the clock too.
I don't want to kill you guys.
Yes, please, please.
Are you okay with that?
Please.
Questions?
You're
I just didn't know how long we were.
Yeah. Well, happy to answer any of your questions. We're here for you.
Thank you. And thank you for advocating for our event and for our audience tonight. Well, before I open the floor for our questions for the audience, I want to learn more about the people who inspire you. So, in your mind, who exemplifies the thought leadership that you would recommend him or her as a future guest speaker for our event? Let's start from Heidi this time.
Ooh, a future speaker for this event. Well, I mean, honestly, the first person who comes to mind is my partner, Emily Melton, who's also a Stanford GSB grad. And she's, I have the good fortune to work with her, and she's 20 years younger than I am. And so we often compare and contrast, like, the experience I've had versus the experience she's had. I mean, I think that's the important thing, is on the one hand, it's great to hear from us grumpy old ladies. But on the other hand, it's really nice to hear from someone who's kind of more the leading of the charge, and she just last year was chairman of the NVCA, so she's actually picked up that ball and run with it too. So when it comes to venture, I'd recommend Emily.
So I'm gonna pick somebody from the governance side. I think, I mentioned her earlier, Maggie Witterwater, which is probably one of the most boarded women in the United States. She started when she was 28. When she was 28, she went and asked, why can't I be a board member? Why do I have to wait until I retire for somebody to tell me that I can serve as a board member? So at age 28, she got on the board. And she's been on every, a 34 public company board, like 50 private venture-backed company board.
She's on the Costco board, which is,
Costco,
you want to have an interesting conversation.
Yeah, you get the employee discount for Costco? Come on. Yeah, that's not a good gig. I don't know what it is. It's like, I can make a killing out of that employee discount. But Costco, HP, DocuSign, live, I just like a cadence design system, you name it. But more importantly, as she became the most well-known, wouldn't you say, the woman corporate
Definitely.
board member? Everywhere you go to Goldman Sachs conference, JP Morgan conference, whatever the conference for corporate directors, and you see her on the agenda, because there is just no one bigger than she is from the experience. But the most admiring part about that, she herself has put over 800 people on company boards. So you're talking about the big five, the Egon, Hedrick, Russell Reynolds, and all these firms that we've been none of them come even close. So she has single-handedly, because most of them are women, minority, first-time board member, and Heidi and I will both tell you the hardest thing is your very first public company board. It's like once you get on your first board, everybody's like, "Yay, she's ready!" So your doors start being knocked on a lot after that. So in helping people overcome that very first obstacle, she just developed this Rolodex of people where she recommend people, tell them what to do with their resume, how to position themselves. And it's a one-woman army that has resulted to 821, I think was the last number I heard, board member being placed on public company board, which I don't know, so if you ever doubt that a single individual can make an impact, that will tell you. This is, so if you ever have a chance to get Maggie here, she will be inspiring for all those who have the ambition to serve on board in that capacity.
Well, follow your advice, seeking for help. I definitely will seek for both of your help on getting the speakers you mentioned for our future events. And finally, a question close to many of our hearts at Stanford: what matters most to you and why?
Is there anything answer that you ever got outside the family,
Yeah.
people that I love?
Well,
It's so true. It doesn't matter what you do in life, there is nothing, right? Doesn't matter how, lucky you got, how well recognized, how much honor you receive. There is just nothing that comes close.
Well, the thing I'm most jealous about is Claudia showed me a picture of her grandchild when we got here, and I don't have one of those. And so I was like, I need one of those.
Yes, no, I definitely, I think, having that foundation is what really allow us to be who we are, is really having people that, in our life. And just like Heidi said, all my mentor, all my champions in my career in IBM and in venture are, to be honest, all white Caucasian men. It's not like, I feel discriminated or anything, but people in your life that matter to you at different stages of your life, those are the things that matters the most.
Okay, sounds good. And let's open the floor for questions. If Claudia and Heidi, you can stay for 10 minutes?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think we scheduled. Okay, yeah.
Do you need a microphone? Can you
No, I
speak
think
up?
I'm loud enough. Yes.
All right.
So, should I stand up?
Yeah, no, you're very loud and clear.
Okay,
Do whatever
cool.
you want.
Yes, so for me as a new generation VC, I feel like VC industry have grown a lot. More like the Wall Street like, especially for the first young entrepreneur. It's like a lot of formal growth, just like the Wall Street like VC was fighting for when VC started. So what are the new trends that you see are in the VC industry that's happening or is going to happen? For example, S&Z being a newcomer compared to many other VC with their post-operation management team, which really made them so popular. YC essentially reinvented their pre-stage investing model with demo day and batch people together. So what are the similar trends or the future things that you think can change VC industry moving forward?
No, I personally don't feel it's changed that much. I think the VC industry has always been about people. It's always been about network, YC or other. I mean, most of the people will tell you the experience there is much more about connecting with the people right? Very often the founder that you're in the same class together, investors that traffic in and out. So from that perspective, there is a generational change going on right now. Lots of major, well-established firms are going through that leadership shift right now from, you know, the generations are, you know, from retiring to the new generations are taking the realm. But the nature of the venture business really hasn't changed. It's about, am I someone you want to build your company with? Right? Look at me. Look at what I've done. Look at the way I treat people. Look at the way I treat people I don't like and people that I like. Look at how the investor treat people when is a insolvency case, right? When you're going through crisis or downturn. So that aspect, I think, continue to be the core operating factor in the venture ecosystem.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, I actually don't think ventures change that much. I mean, we'll see what AI does, but maybe none of us will have a job in a few more years. But I think ultimately it goes back to something I originally said, which is it is about the people, and people are people first, and they're their job second, even entrepreneurs, even though your job occupies this much of your mind at the time you're an entrepreneur, but there's this little piece over here that's still a human being. And we just had this situation last week where it was a really competitive deal, and one of our most junior people came up with a brilliant idea about, you know, she listened to the entrepreneurs, and it turned out that they are, you know, they're dog lovers, and they have a, you know, their culture is really important to them, and their company name has wolf in it. So I won't tell you the name, I won't tell you the company, because we haven't closed the deal yet, although we're in documents now. But and she had listened to them, and in addition to doing all the things VCs normally do to win a deal, right? You do all the work, and you come in, you ask the right questions, and you go fly to where they are, and you take them out to dinner. She came up with the idea that as a thank you for them spending time, that there was a wolf sanctuary, and she adopted a wolf in their name on their behalf and sent them the document. And it's like, you know, it's a $250 investment, right? It's a, you know, it's the like rent, you know, get an animal zoo or whatever. They were so touched by that because it said, you know, you actually tried to understand us as people, that they told us that one of the reasons we won the deal is because of the wolf. And so I just think it's that important, you know, and this is one of the things I think that's really problematic about sort of some of the frenzy periods that venture goes through, is if you're only meeting someone for the first time when they're already in their fundraise cycle, it's too late, right? Because you can't build that relationship. You need to be, you know, again, meeting them earlier and earlier and earlier. Not really investing in them earlier, but meeting them earlier. And so I don't think that's changed at all. And I think that's where the new wave of VCs, because you probably know more of the new wave of entrepreneurs than we necessarily know. So I think that's why this industry continues to renew itself all the time, and why the younger generation of VCs plays such an important role. So I don't see it changing really.
Homing your people skills.
David?
So talking about, you know, kind of, first of all, thanks a lot for sharing your research experience, and just based on what you are saying in the previous question, so we're building a data-driven systematic VC fund. So essentially what we're doing, we're collecting a bunch of that data on whatever we can get on startups. Then we separate them into successful and failed startups, and then we try to find commonalities, attributes that make founders, companies successful, not successful, and based on these, we collect pitch decks, scrape data, and then also kind of separate this into two baskets, like, you know, keep different benchmarks, quantify data, and try to understand, you know, like, who are these successful kind of founders, what makes them successful, and then when you go to a later stage, Series A, B, we already kind of add financials, like projections, and all that kind of stuff. So, what is wrong with our approach? Like, what are some of the challenges?
I'll just tackle that right, and please don't take offense. You are not the first person who's tried this. And the problem is that the signals you're relying on to do that are only the signals that are available to you. And the signals that are available to you are not necessarily an indicator of what is actually going on in the company. And the earlier the company is, the less value those signals have. So I know, for example, a lot of people scrape like LinkedIn and what's going on LinkedIn and how many people you're hiring or what are the titles of the people. And if somebody shows an uptick, you think that company's being more successful. But sometimes they just go on a hiring spree, you know. And so the question I would have for you is, it's a little bit like, I'm actually, tomorrow's podcast, not just trying to blog my podcast, I spend thing on this all the time, is I'm doing one about why 409A valuations are kind of meaningless. And that the reason is because 409As capture a bunch of things, because that's what the accounting firms can capture. They don't capture how disruptive are you going to be, what is the quality of your team, what is the quality of the leader of the team. There's a whole bunch of stuff. And actually, like, you'll get downgraded if you have less money in the bank than you had a year ago. But what if the reality is you're not raising right now because you know you're about to hit a big milestone that's going to 10x your value, and you're just going to push to that? Like, you can have good reasons to run your bank account down. That's why entrepreneurs raise money in the first place, to spend it. They don't raise it to keep it in the bank. So I just think that there's this idea of, if you overly rely on the signals that are available to you, you're actually going to miss the best companies. Yeah. So, but I could be wrong. In a way, I hope I'm wrong, because maybe that'll bring more interesting companies to life.
I think you should use that as an augmentation of as a venture investor. You can use all that data collection, all the analytics as an augment for decision making. But it cannot be just like Heidi said, when you were talking, the first thing that came to mind is, boy, have we seen this before, right? I mean, try after try, people always say, well, I can create the playbook, right? And just based on playbook, their funds are just following people, how many people go from this fund to that fund. All the approaches that were removing the people business that the VC are in has failed. So I will say, I'm an engineer, data speaks. Use it as an augmentation of your decision making, but do not rely on it as a single due diligence.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. Last question? Okay.
Sure. First of all, thank you for a brilliant night. Kevin Callanan, I'm with Lucid Motors. You've already touched on this, but what are some of the core elements that you have to see before you start thinking about, I might fund a deal?
See, for me, it's a conviction.
No.
Right? I mean, for me, very few startup. Of course, there's it has to be something compelling. Has to be something that I can actually understand the market, understand the technology. But then there's got to be a conviction level. Many of my CEOs that I serve on the public board ask me, and I gave a lot of thought in terms of what is the difference between a public board CEO and a venture-backed CEO that identifies. And for me, it is that conviction, because you're going to iterate, right? As an entrepreneur, you're going to iterate as often, as rapidly as it takes to reach the product market, to meet the product market fit that you're seeking. And that level of conviction that you can get that done, that you believe in the idea, is a major component. I don't know how many times we walk out of a pitch session and say, wow, they don't seem to know what, believe what they're doing.
Yeah.
So we're, why do they?
You're not going to believe what?
Right, why am I going to believe that? I mean, first of all, chances are you as an entrepreneur has more domain expertise in whatever you're trying to do. And then VCs very often rely on that level of conviction to really fund you to whatever, at least the proof of concept. That's why you take average 7 rounds of funding for you to get to any kind of commercially viable product. But they are ready to take you to the next round, right, to really prove out if there's something real or not. But at the concept phase, that level of conviction, your domain expertise and all that is a key component.
Yeah, I would just add, and by the way, I know we're gonna run out of time, a lot of people are gonna have to run out, including me, but my email is heidi@threshold.vc, so if you had a question and we didn't get to answer it, I'm happy to answer your questions. Two things. One is can it be a really big, successful company? And when I say successful, I don't mean users, or we used to call it eyeballs, remember those days?
Yeah.
Revenue, profit, and growth. Can I see that this company, if it works and the business model works, can achieve massive revenue, profit, and growth? Because we're in the hits business. We only make money on it's the power law, right? So we have to believe that these things can be big. And then the second one is, do I believe this person has the growth mindset, the tenacity, the skill set? Do they have a history of doing it? But not all the entrepreneurs have any history of doing it because they're young people. Do I think they have what it takes to get this company through its difficult periods? And like Claudia is saying, some people come in and they're not. And by the way, there is this. I'll close on. There is this theory that VCs overfund narcissists, and part of it is because narcissists come in with a lot of conviction that they're going to be able to do it, and we buy it, And so there is sort of this. I always worry about, like, am I undercounting the person who's really shy and doesn't talk and doesn't seem like a great leader?
You probably do.
And the answer is maybe you do, but also a lot of, they also have, it's not just convincing us for money, it's convincing customers, it's convincing employees, it's convincing regulators sometimes. There are a lot of regulated businesses.
Your employee is a very important part.
Yeah,
right? If you
so
can
I do
convince
think
others.
that it is that, what is the conviction around the person is actually really important. And I will say, when I have invested in companies, I'm an optimist, you can probably tell. When I first became a VC, everything looked good to me. And everything is like, I can fix it. And so if it was bad, but it's good and it's a really good market idea. And 100% of those ones where it was a good market idea, but not a team that was awesome, they failed.
Yeah.
So I learned my lesson. Expensive lesson.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. As our evening comes to a close, I want to extend a heartfelt thank you for every one of you for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia Munce and Heidi Roizen.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.